Hello and welcome, my name is Will, and in today's random build episode I thought I'd take a look at making a cool bookshelf for scrolls that could be used as D&D or fantasy scatter terrain. I saw a cool diamond bookshelf model on Thingiverse which I printed for this project, and I really wanted to make actual aged paper scrolls to go in it. This technique for aging paper is really useful for all kinds of prop making, so let's have a look how I made it. I started with a few bits of blank A4 paper and a selection of wanted poster and banner images I found on a quick Google search and printed out. I decided I was going to use instant coffee in water to stain some test pieces of paper. I put a teaspoon of coffee in a pot and added some cold water and mixed it in. I also made a pot of hot coffee to see if there was any difference. I then got a metal baking tray and the test strips of paper labelled hot and cold, and using a paintbrush I applied the coffee mixtures to the paper. I turned the oven on to 180 degrees so I could dry the paper and get that aged look, but before I show you the results I must warn you that putting paper in your oven, especially a fan oven, is definitely a fire risk. You must not attempt this casually or become distracted, and kids must absolutely ask for parents' help with this. I highly recommend putting a weight on each piece of paper as well, such as a couple of spoons or something, just to stop the paper blowing around and potentially catching fire. Also, don't use fridge magnets to stick the paper down, as you can melt them or disrupt their magnetism with the heat. Also, don't use the grill thinking it's quicker, the paper will certainly catch fire in the grill. Seriously, be really careful. Right, safety briefing over with, let's see what we've got after just 30 seconds or so in the oven. The cold coffee stain seemed to come out stronger in colour whilst being easier to make, as I wouldn't have to keep making hot coffee, so I decided to go with the cold. I proceeded to stain a bunch of crinkled up paper with the cold coffee and pop them in the oven one sheet at a time for about 30 seconds each. I never stopped watching the paper just in case it started blowing around. It all came out looking good and will come in useful for various projects. I did do a test using tea instead of coffee to see if it was any better, but it turned out to give a weaker colour, so I stuck with the coffee. I was happy with how all the paper looked. It had that nice old parchment look to it. I put the wanted posters and details off to one side and took the thin paper strips for making the scrolls with. I rolled the thin strips of paper up tightly using a cocktail stick. This was a bit fiddly and I did rip the paper slightly, but eventually managed to roll them up nice and tight. I then used a tiny amount of PVA glue to glue the end of the scroll down, but for your project you might want to tie the scroll with ribbon or string, depending on the scale. I'll quickly show painting the 3D printed bookshelf model for this build, but it isn't the focus of the video. After cleaning and curing the resin print, I gave it a base coat in white and then airbrushed with a warm brown ink. Then using a Games Workshop contrast paint, snakebite leather, I painted the whole thing for that rich dark wood look. To even out the colour I washed all over with Games Workshop Agrax Earth Shade. I still wasn't happy with the flat backs of the shelves, so I decided to paint them black. And then it was time to cut the scrolls down to size. I very roughly marked their depth on the shelves with a little overhang, and after taking the cocktail stick out of the middle, I cut a bunch of the tiny scrolls using scissors. I was going to need a lot more than I'd made from the first scroll, but it was already looking superb. I made some of the scrolls thinner by using shorter strips of paper for a bit of variation. I think this helps sell the much used bookcase look. Before gluing the scrolls in, I decided the shelves needed a little dry brush to neaten up, so using Games Workshop Tyrant Skull, I gave the bookcase an all-over light dry brush. Now it was time to glue the scrolls, and I settled on using PVA glue for this. I applied a fair amount to the back and parts of the shells the scrolls would be touching and pushed them in place. I used tweezers to help manipulate the scrolls until I was happy. And then I left it out in the sun to dry. It looks awesome and I'm really happy with how it turned out. As I said at the beginning, this method of staining paper can be used for all sorts of projects, from making prop spellbooks and ancient parchment to full-size scrolls or letters and envelopes. Also kids' school history projects and captivating treasure maps for smaller children. Just search for pirate treasure maps and print them off, or draw your own to match your own garden. So what do you think? Have you tried making aged paper before? What methods did you use? I'd love to hear your takes and what projects you've tried this on. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Hit the like and subscribe buttons if you found this video helpful, and as always, there's a couple of links below that you can use to help out the channel if you want to. Until next time, bye bye.